This is a book review over The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business for NU 7020 Family and Community. So this book begins with a overview of Eugene and his battle with memory loss. Eugene lost his memory due to a battle with viral encephalopathy. That viral encephalopathy attacked his basal ganglia. Gene spent quite a bit of time in the hospital recovering and had notable losses in short-term memory, but was able to maintain much of his long-term memory from prior to the infection. He goes on to continue the many years that he and his wife had in difficulties attempting to make new habits and work with his loss of short-term memory in order to keep him safe and that he and his wife could continue to live a full life. It determines that habits are not something that just are, but are something that are formed and created. He maintained a lot of his habits from prior to his infection, and this led to a long research study to delve into the development, creation, and recreation of habit-forming behaviors. Eugene was able to communicate fine, but was unable to answer simple questions about where things were in his house, who his family members were, and was unable to make conscious decisions for things as simple as trying to figure out where things were in his kitchen. During meetings with the researcher, it was noted that he was able to just act on the impulse of needing something to eat, not having any idea where the kitchen was or where food was in the kitchen. He was able to just get up and walk across the room and unconsciously make the decision to go in and make himself a snack or grab the nuts out of the cabinet, although he was unable to answer where those were. He had no idea why he knew how to get those things. He just knew that he was hungry. This led to the creation in Chapter 2 of more research as to how habits are created. So it was determined that habits are a rather simplified thing that are from our very basic needs in life and were developed as a primary means to save brain energy, thus not needing as large of a brain in order to maintain normal tasks of daily life. So it was determined that habits are defined by three pieces. First, a cue. In his case, the cue was he was hungry. The routine was to get up and get something to eat. The reward was being satisfied with being able to eat. Even though he was unable to form new habits, or apparently unable to form new habits, he went through this loop constantly. So it was determined that he was able to, or later on, advertisers use this type of loop to make really good advertising campaigns based upon a need for something and developing a routine. But these cues, routines, and rewards are a continuous loop. Researchers had used mice and had trained them to sit behind a door, wait for a click, and then once they heard a click, they would walk up a hallway and then go right or left to receive a chocolate reward. Well, they had wired the brains of these mice so that they could monitor brain activity. The brain activity led them to see that there was a great deal of brain activity initially when they were starting the testing prior to actually receiving the reward. And the more the mice did it, the more the cue of the click and the door opening would allow them to use that memory and create a routine. And the routine was walking down the hall and not stopping and sniffing down the hall back and forth. And they knew whether to turn right or left to receive their reward. So the more they did this, the more they noticed that the brain activity prior to receiving the reward was decreasing and then would spike with the reward. They continued the testing. As they continued the testing, they found that the cue of the click had basically no effect on brain activity in the mice. The routine, they would just walk straight up the hall, they would make their left-hand turn, and they would get to their reward. But they were having a spike in brain activity right before the reward. So they were having this reward sensation prior to actually receiving the reward. So scientists continued to develop this, have used it for years now in very successful marketing campaigns. So knowing that, in order to change a habit, once a habit is formed, the habit never goes away. But we can modify the habit. In order to modify the habit, it was determined that we didn't actually need to create a brand new habit, but instead we could use the existing habit and change just one portion of it. We could change the routine within the habit. So we would stick with the same cue and the same reward, but we would change the routine. In the use of Coach Dungy of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he came in and instead of trying to change all of the habits and create new habits for his team, he actually would go in and use all of the cues that they were already seeing in the opposing players, modifying their routine, and then accomplishing the same reward, which would be a successful play. The cues the players were coming up with are unchanged. They still see the same things. They see the movements of quarterbacks. They see the movements of the offensive players. But they had ingrained a new routine within that so that they didn't have to think about it. And they practiced it and practiced it and practiced it to the point where that routine became part of the habit. And the new habit was going up to a situation, seeing those cues, not having to make a decision about what was going to happen next, and just implementing. I'm sorry, my hands were shaking. Implementing the new routine and receiving the reward they wanted. They had decided later on, through studies of Alcoholics Anonymous, that the same type of system could be used to change the habits of alcoholics. Unknowingly so. They did this without any scientific research, but they had gone in and they had the same cue of wanting to drink, or more or less wanting to remove a particular stressor from their lives, and that cue of wanting to get rid of that stress or that stressor would be to have a drink. That was their routine. The reward would be that they would drink away their problems, not necessarily to get drunk, but as an activity that they use to relieve stress, much like a smoker would do in the same type of situation. The problem they found was that not all people who stopped drinking would continue to stop drinking. They would move along just fine. They would use their sponsors, and they would begin to believe that they were fine, and they no longer needed to attend those meetings, and would fall off the wagon. When in the process of falling off the wagon, they were encountering a new stress, some life event that was stressing them to the point that they felt unconsciously that they needed to go back into their comfortable old routine. The old routine was I have a stressor, I have a drink, my stressor goes away, and you have the same cue, routine and reward that they had previously, and they were falling back upon that during those stressful times. Otherwise, they were remaining clean and sober. So we can reprogram our minds. In order to reprogram our minds, they found that to be more successful, they not only just have to do that one step of reprogramming the middle of it, their routine, but they needed to have a belief, and that belief needed to be that they could affect change, things would be better, that they had a higher power, as in the use of religion in Alcoholics Anonymous. So the use of religion in that actually strengthened their belief system, so that they did believe that they could make it through these difficult times without having a drink, and they could maintain their newly formed habits without falling back on the old ones. With new patients, I would say that many times I deal with patients who are newly diagnosed with heart failure. These patients have a very, very normal routine. Typically, and I wouldn't say typically, in a lot of cases, they have poor exercise regimens, high salt diets, they are obese, they suffer from hypertension, and they have a set of habits. They don't work out, they don't eat properly, they don't maintain their medication regimen, and they feel as though they can't, and without even knowing it, they kind of self-destruct themselves and have very little recovery from this. I would say with those patients, we would try to find their cue, their routine, and their reward. So something as simple as a cardiac rehab facility or program to be part in. A lot of these people have done very little or no exercise for many, many years. In order to increase their exercise, I would say that instead of just sitting and not doing anything and not believing that they can do anything, that instead of just sitting there watching TV, as they normally would, their daily cue is, I'm tired, I'll just sit down. Well, instead of just sitting down, we get them into a program. This program may remove their routine of sitting down and watching that normal television show during the day. And instead, we suggest or enroll them into a cardiac rehab program. That cardiac rehab program will get them up. So their cue now, instead of watching TV at that time of day, is, I need to go to my cardiac rehab appointment. With that cardiac rehab appointment, they go in, and instead of watching the television and having the reward of just the end of that show and having learned something new or enjoyed it, they can go in and they are in a group of people, in a supportive group of people, who are going to have them do some exercise. This exercise is run by medical professionals who do this every day. So they have very good cues for these people to come in. They will call them at that time and have them come in. They're going to come in and they're going to go through a new program. They're going to get their daily weight. They're going to come in, they're going to get on their treadmill or their stationary bicycle and move for a while. And get their EKGs, check the oxygen saturation, and all these things. Well, in the process of doing these appointments, they now will have not just the reward of having sat at home and done something that they find satisfying, but instead changing that satisfaction to something rewarding that is actually increased activity. So this increased activity will give them that reward of feeling like they've done something meaningful and purposeful in their life. As they see that they can do these, then they can start to, through time, see that they are able to walk longer or use the exercise bike longer and be less winded. and have less pain potentially with their heart. And they start to believe that they can do these things. Well, that belief will help with the next cue. The cue is I'm going to do something that I feel good about. I'm going to go in, I'm going to do my cardiac rehab. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to do my normal routine of coming in, speaking with the nurses or the physicians, getting my weights, and getting up on my piece of exercise equipment. Now, this time, after a month, first of all, maybe they could only go 2 minutes walking before they were winded and were uncomfortable. Now they're working up to, say, 7 or 8, maybe even 10 minutes of being able to walk. So they can do more things at home themselves. Or maybe even get out into the general public and go to the mall and walk without having to grab one of the chairs. So now they have a new reward. Their new reward is this increased activity, and they feel better about themselves. The better they feel about themselves, the more they believe. The more they believe, the more likely they are to use the cue. And the cue is I need to get up and do something meaningful. I need to get up and do something that I enjoy. I'm going to go for a walk. So now they go for a walk. They can walk even farther. And are able to go spend time with their grandkids or be able to go to the grocery store and not have to use one of these chairs. And that is a reward. So we get into this perpetual loop of being able to do this. On a personal note, I have used this book to re-energize myself into working out. Instead of just spending all day sitting in front of a computer reading, now when I get tired, instead of going and stopping for a few moments and sitting down and watching a half-hour TV show or an hour-long TV show, I have made the conscious effort to change my own routine. And instead of doing that, I keep my gym bag and my workout clothes downstairs near my computer. And when it's time that I feel as though I'm starting to get tired and lazy and don't want to do anything, if it's during the day, then I get up and I will grab my workout equipment. I will go up to the gym. I will do some running, some rowing, maybe weightlifting exercises, something to get my heart flowing and get me going. With that, I have the reward, instead of just sitting there and feeling accomplished with my homework but being extremely tired, I have the reward of having done something for myself that actually energizes me more, and I can come home and am more effective with my studies, and actually am able to stay up longer at night doing it, although it seems like I get it done faster. So I believe that my change in workout regimen has actually helped me to focus more. So I'm going to use a little bit of my own medicine that I would otherwise be using for my patients, and see if I can get myself back into the shape that I was just several months ago. And I am enjoying it thoroughly. So I look forward to seeing the rest of this book and learning even more tips and tricks. Christopher Edmondson. Thank you.